Chang-rae Lee is a Korean-American author known for his insightful explorations of identity, cultural displacement, and the immigrant experience in America. He rose to stardom with his debut novel Native Speaker in 1995, for which he received the Hemingway Award for a debut novel. He's also acclaimed for his other novels such as A Gesture Life, Aloft, and On Such a Full Sea. And now the Korean translation of his latest novel, his most recent novel, My Year Abroad, has hit the bookshelves here in Korea. So to tell us about his work and his new book, Professor Lee joins us via video call for this week's Touch Base in Seoul. Professor, hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, nice to be here.
So yes, as we said, the Korean translation of My Year Abroad has been published here in South Korea now. How do you feel?
Well, I'm always excited about my work being translated into Korean. I think even though a lot of Korean readers read my books in the original English, it's an extra special feeling to know that Korean speakers can interact with the story, in their most comfortable language.
Do you get feedback then from Korean readers about your books?
I do. I get a lot of emails from both older readers and also students. So it's a range of questions about my work for just their personal curiosity, sometimes for academic reasons, research. So it's always very fulfilling for me to know that there are lots of readers in Korea for my work.
Now, on this segment, we like to explore a bit more about the origins of our guests, how they got started in their field. So tell us, how did you become a writer in the first place?
Oh, well, I think it's the usual story. I mean, nothing special. As a school kid, I was always reading. I loved literature, and at some point, I think with most readers, they have this maybe inkling that they could perhaps write some of this material themselves and give someone else that same set of feelings and emotions about life in the world. And so I started writing in high school. I wrote a little bit in college, mostly though just was a student of literature in college. And then afterwards, after a brief time working on Wall Street at a financial firm, I quit that job to try to write. And I ended up going to graduate school.
Right, but that last point,
publishing my first novel.
That last point fascinated me, that you were on Wall Street. You worked in finance for a while, but then you gave all that up to become a writer. That must have been quite a decision to make.
It was, particularly back then. This was in the late '80s. I didn't really have many models for myself as a working novelist, but I felt as if I had to give it a chance. I was only 22 years old, and I'd once read an interview with John Updike, who said that he had also the same kind of quandary with his parents. They wondered why he was going to try to become a novelist, and he said that, well, I don't know if I can become a novelist, but I'll give it 5 years and see what happens. And I sort of said the same thing to my folks, because I was realistic about it. It's like any pursuit of the arts. It's in our society, in our civilization. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing to do, and particularly to make a life out of. So I feel I've been very lucky.
Your books, their focus isn't not necessarily on Korean characters or settings per se, but they resonate with themes of cultural identity and the immigrant experience. How does your background and your identity as a Korean American, how has that affected your work, do you think?
Well, certainly in my experience as growing up in an immigrant family, and I think I have a lot in common with other immigrant writers in America who's from different, national backgrounds. In the sense of being a little distanced from the culture, looking out from the outside in at the culture, feeling as if you belong in some areas in some regards, and in others you never will. I think that's goes a lot towards what built my perspective about the culture, about how people live within that culture, how they engage with that culture, and try to make a life within it. The Korean aspect to it, of course, is particular to me, and something that I, didn't really think about in terms of, trying to present something quote unquote Korean. I've always said that my Koreanness, I'm sure, as we all know, we all have our individual Koreanness, especially those of us who are Korean American. We come from, we've grown up in different places, in different family settings. Obviously, there's a baseline of cultural tradition and cultural influences, but how we take those influences and how we run with them are all different. That said, again, so much value my Koreanness. And when I was younger, of course, I always had to explain my Koreanness to people. They didn't understand what that was. They knew what Japanese culture was or Chinese culture was. They had no sense of Korean culture or Korean people. And of course, in the last 10 to 15 years, that's changed quite a bit around the world. I could never have predicted how popular and widespread Korean things and Koreanness has become. It's quite startling and wonderful.
Indeed, it's quite a time for Korean culture at the moment. Let's talk a bit more about My Year Abroad. Can you introduce our listeners to the story, what it's about? It was published originally in English in 2021, right?
Yes, published 2 years ago here. It's quite a different novel for me. I think mainly because of who the hero is. He's quite a young man. He's about 20 years old, taking a year off of college, planning to do a typical year abroad in Europe or some other place in some academic program. But he ends up hooking up with a local businessman of Chinese descent, an entrepreneur, and decides to become his assistant and to travel the world in pursuit of a business venture. Of course, what happens in the course of it is a lot of wild and crazy exploits, some pretty serious travails, both physically and psychically. In some ways, it's a novel of growing up, of coming of age. But I've tried to imbue the hero. His name is Tiller, and he's partly Korean. He calls himself just a slice Korean. I try to imbue him with perhaps a wiser heart, if not a wiser head. Maybe it's a coming of age novel told from the point of view of someone who is my age, in middle age, and worried about so larger issues of mortality and the body and
Right.
and what we're doing in this world.
It was the first book that you published in 7 years. That's quite a gap. What inspired you to write this? You said that this was quite a departure for you as well, and I've read reviews that say it was a chance for you to let loose. You talk about some of the wild and crazy exploits as well. Where did this come from? Where did this story come from?
Well, I think it came from a yearning to get out of myself. As you know, I don't know if you mentioned, but I've taught all my life. I'm a professor at university, and so I'm constantly surrounded by 18 to 21 year olds. And throughout the years I've been teaching for 30 years, I've only grown older and they stay the same age. And I'm always fascinated by their energy, their outlook, their worries. Especially these days, young people seem to be so fraught with anxieties and pressures that I think we put on them. And so the book was partly my response to their issues, and also my admiration and love for their exuberance and their energy. And so it became for me quite a much larger book than I envisioned from the start. And that's probably why it took me so long.
Right, so in one way, it's perhaps dedicated to your students. Have they read the book? Have you forced them to read the book? And what has their reaction been?
No, we literature professors and creative writing professors don't require our books to be reading like economics professors. It's probably not a good financial move, but I, um, I have gotten feedback from younger people and my students in particular. They seem to find it quite entertaining, which is in the end what I was hoping for. An entertainment that would be also startling, sometimes shocking, sometimes disturbing, but in the end, emotional, and 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 I hoped some kind of respite from these troubled times.
As you say, you teach creative writing currently at Stanford University. You taught at Princeton as well, some very prestigious schools there. Would you say you're a good teacher? And how does your teaching influence your writing as well, do you think?
Well, I think I'm a pretty good teacher. I think I get good feedback from my students. They seem to enjoy my classes. I think it's for me, what I get from my students, and not so much about my writing, but I love the writing in particular, but I appreciate their energy and their enthusiasm and ambition for writing. The same kind of energy I know I had when I was that age in the early parts of my career. Being more settled now as a writer, and as also just as a person, I think it's just natural to have a different kind of approach to it. A more sort of working man's approach, where you're just doing your job day by day, and
Right.
sometimes you forget about what about the romance of it, I suppose. And but making up, because making art is a difficult thing, but it's also can be, as my students know, a glorious thing when you do something that you feel is like something a little different and fresh.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Just as a final thought, what are your future plans as well? Is there more works that are ready to be published? Are you working on anything else? And do you have any plans also to come to Korea at any point to meet your fans here in Korea?
Yeah, well, I'm almost finished with a new book, a short novel that's partly autobiographical, although it's not an autobiography. It's mostly fictionalized, but it's about a young Korean American boy growing up in New York City in the 1970s. So it's as with all my work, it's both kind of familiar sounding, but also quite strange. so I hope that will be out next year or the year after, and depending. And I don't have plans right yet to come to Korea. I was there last year visiting family, and but I always love my visits. I cherish them, and so I'm hoping to get back soon.
Yes, I'm sure your fans here would be eager to see you soon as well. We'll wrap it up there. We've been talking to author Chang-rae Lee. Thank you once again for your time today.
Thanks so much.